And yeah, let's start so with the conversation today. So first, a general welcome and thank you to be there on behalf of IRI, of SLOCAT, and the NDC Transport Initiative for Asia. So we are really happy to can organize this conversation between us about national strategies for enhancing ambition, the climate ambition. This is really an important moment, let's say, in the climate agenda right now, because as you know, the COP26 will happen in the end of the year, and this will be, let's say, the starting point of the next. So this is let's say, the first landing point of the first revision of the NDCs, and let's say also the starting point of a new cycle of revision of the national contributions, and which start with a global stock take that we will collectively do. And of course, look at as a focal point of UNFCCC for the transport stakeholders, and IDWI that works a lot, I mean, on the development of the initial, or contributed to the development of the first Paris Agreement, with many involvement, in particular on the development of long-term strategies and the Article 4.19. So we are really happy to have you all on board today. The agenda is the following. I will actually start with a framing presentation introducing you the report done by the DDP network that called Beyond Emission Numbers, taking stock of progress by looking inside countries and sectors. Then discussing, having a second time where we will have the opportunity to have colleagues that have participated to the report and that will present some of the insights regarding of course, the future of transport. So on zero emission future and what are the challenges and enabling conditions. So we'll have Alice Yu from SLOCAT presenting, who created SLOCAT to the writing of the specific transport chapter of the report, and Dipti Gupta from the Indian Institute of Management of Lucknow that also contributed to the Indian chapter in the report, and that will present some insights related to the subsector. And finally, we will have a panel all together with Teng Fei, Deputy Director of Energy, Environment, Economy Institute at Tsinghua University, Ray Tran from the Ministry of Planning and Investment of Vietnam, Garima Agrawal, the Manager of Integrated Urban Transport at WRI India, and also a leader in the NDC Transport Initiative Asia, and Marta Torres Gunfals from IDWI, that has led the whole report and that has led the major project at the DDP initiative in main emerging economies, including India, Indonesia, South Africa, and Brazil. So really happy to have you all on board. And let's start directly with the first presentation I will do about the report. So my name is Yann Briand. So I'm working also at IDWI and working especially on the transport sector within the DDP initiative. So the report is called Beyond Transport Emission Numbers, and Climate Ambition Beyond Emission Numbers, taking stock of progress by looking inside countries and sectors. So the report is available on our website, so you can easily find it. And this report, actually, I will enter into the few details just afterwards, but this report has been published just in September this year and produced over the 2 last months, to be published indeed just before the COP26, and to discuss indeed the topic of climate ambition and what it means for the next period in the climate agenda. So let me introduce it briefly, some points of context and motivation for this report. So first, I think there are 2 main points that you see here. One on the long term to inform short term. The second one on beyond emission numbers towards bottom-up conditionalities. And the third context point that I will do about this climate policy agenda. First of all, the long term to inform the short term. Clearly, the current targets and short-term targets that we have seen in different activities are not built consistently most of the time with the long-term objective. And there are some issues for us that we foresee that working on the long-term perspective, working with long-term strategies could enable to ensure that we are reaching the good point by 2050 or 2060, 70. So this long-term horizon, and ensure that the short-term action that we are taking now are consistent and enable us really to be on the right pathway to reach this long-term objective. I think it's important to reconnect these two horizons and to ensure that the short term is not built completely independently of the long-term target we need to reach. Second point on beyond emission numbers and towards bottom-up conditionalities, what we have noticed also is that most of the debates very often were focused on aggregated emission numbers, talking about the targets that we will need to reach, but without discussing actually or understanding and discussing in depth what is happening in the countries, in the subsectors, what are the transformations that needs to be implemented in details, what are the conditions of implementation of this transformation. So clearly, the point that we recognize here is to say debates that are focused on emission numbers are important to set like a clear target on a horizon or an objective. But if we want to implement the transition and increase also in the end the ambition, because by being able to better qualify the transformation, we also collectively are better able to increase the ambition. This requires clearly to look into this heterogeneity of the country situation, but also of the sectors. And we need to be able to establish, understand what are these conditions of feasibility to implement the strategy, and also make it clear for each actors. And third point, the climate policy agenda. So that's what I just said at the beginning. So here is where we are in the current cycle. You know that the global stocktake will start beginning of next year and will be a process, a UNFCCC process that will be conducted till end of 2023. And indeed, at this moment, we should ask ourselves collectively, and that's a bit here the key question of the approach for us. The question is how to effectively guide the progressive increase of ambition as organized by the cyclical process of the Paris Agreement. Said in other words, we will have the global stocktake that will start next year and over the 2 next years. Clearly, how could we, for example, contribute to this process, or what is needed in the global stocktake? What is needed to be revealed or to be discussed to enable, in the end, that it facilitate, for example, the increase of ambition or better NDCs by 2025. So the approach of the report consists in proposing an illustration for what can be actually cross-cutting bottom-up assessment of the collective progress in reality and also in these projected ambitions. And second, to provide means for reflection and action within the international community in the lead up to COP26. And with the ideas to provide enough information on different countries, on different sectors that could help inform some specific discussion to advance the climate ambition agenda. So now I will just finish on this. So the report, what you will find in the report. So this is a huge report. I don't remember, no, you can see it, more than 187 pages, 26 country analysis, 3 sector analysis, transport, land use and industry. And we have tried to produce 10 key cross-cutting messages. In total, more than 70 co-authors. And we are really proud and happy to actually have on board Tengfei, Dipti Gupta, and Alice Yu, from Slokat, and Mark Major, who participated who are co-authors, and also Marta Torres, who is also co-authors for the Spain chapter. So thank you all for being there. In this report, what you will find is information assessment of barriers and enablers in countries and sectors related to the different issues that we can meet, so technical, economic, political, social, institutional, everything going through a bottom-up approach. And also you can find some key insights on the domestic and sectoral discourses about climate governance organization and policies and actions that are happening in the different countries. So I hope that you will have the opportunity to go through and maybe just look at the country you are interested in and the sector you are interested in and find relevant information. And please do not hesitate to also challenge us and discuss with us on how you see your challenges. And maybe just this last one to finish. I will not go that much in depth into these slides because I see that the time is also running a bit. This report clearly aims at contributing to this process of collective learning in two ways. One is clearly contributing to the mutual learning inside countries. So which means countries can learn also from each other on what is happening on the other in the other countries. So looking at the country report. But this is also a mutual learning, or this helps also at the mutual learning among actors. So within a same country, within the same sectors, we know that we will need the different actors to act and actually cooperate together. So the idea is also to better understand what are the barriers, what are the enablers, depending on the actors, and to facilitate this mutual learning of the barriers of the different actors and for other ones. So clearly, you can see, let's say, two ways of having an effect or contribution. Clearly, one of the final goal is to have a higher ambition in upcoming NDCs and concrete action in the real economies, and also to contribute with this sharing of mutual learning to build an effective global stocktake, meaning for us, an effective global stocktake, meaning that these facilitate actually cooperation, an effective cooperation on the key barriers that we need to lever and the kind of solutions that we could find to overcome them, and which in the end could support the national and sectoral transformation and facilitate the raise of ambition in the next NDCs. So the report, just maybe to finish this, the report is only an illustration of the approach. So you will not find a comprehensive assessment. We have not done the global stocktake. So you will not find a comprehensive assessment of everything. You will find first insight and illustration of what this approach could be, and how we think this would be a good idea to structure such conversation. But of course, more efforts would be needed to cover everything, and that's why we are really happy to share that with you, and also hear your point of view at the panel to see how we could make it move forward. So thank you, and I will stop here. And I will actually just introduce Alice and Dipti. So I introduced you actually when I presented the agenda. So we are really happy to have you here today. So the idea, so you will have the opportunity to have these two presentations that will indeed provide some example and some insights from the transport chapter and from the Indian chapter of the report, discussing a bit some of the elements that are in the report. So we are really happy to start with you, Alice, if you want, and then in a second time with you, Dipti. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan, for this very comprehensive explanation. It's always hard to explain, such a big report. Okay, so give me a moment to share a screen if that's fine. Are you seeing my screen all right?
Yes.
Good. Okay, thank you. So yes, again, thank you so much for the opportunity. So on behalf of the SLOCAT team, we're just really proud to be part of the report. So at SLOCAT, a little bit about us is that we are a global ecosystem of 90 different transport entities around the world, enabling collaborative knowledge and action for sustainable low carbon transport, and also bringing the voice of the movement into international climate change and sustainability processes. So I would like to begin by underlining the urgency of the situation that we're facing in the transport sector. Whereas we're seeing a lot of progress in other major sectors, emissions in transport are really going in the wrong direction. So in 2019, transport was the second largest source of global CO2 emissions after the power sector. And it is the fastest growing source of emissions from fossil fuels combustion in the world. So as you can see in the chart, the growth was very linear and more consistent than any other sectors. And at the same time, global ambition to reduce transport emissions, it's very low and insufficient. As of last month, only 15% of the updated nationally determined contributions of the Paris agreements have set specific transport mitigation targets. So if you'd like to learn more about how countries are or are not including transport in national climate strategies, we recently released a resource with the GIZ called the Tracker of Climate Strategies for Transport, where you can take a look for more information. But the overall takeaway from the transport sector that we co-authored with ITRI is that to reach the objectives of the Paris Agreement, the transport sector will need to approach absolute zero emissions by 2050, which cannot be achieved without structural transformation, which goes beyond the technical solutions or simply relying on carbon offsets to compensate for emissions. So what is it really going to take to reverse these trends in rising transport emissions? And I would like to share 3 key takeaways from the chapter. The first one is that we need to shift our overall approach to transport decarbonization. There has been too much focus on working to increase the supply of transport without actually looking at what is causing the demand, and we're not going to get to where we need to be without working to reduce unnecessary travel for both passenger and freight. So people and businesses use transport to access other goods, services, and markets, and not for the sake of transport itself. So we need to look at the decisions and the underlying determinants that influence transport demand, but which are not currently considered within the scope of transport planning. For example, the production of and the consumption of goods and services, urban and rural land use and development patterns, ensuring internet access for all, and the pricing and other fiscal decisions, they all have substantial impacts on transport demand and behavior. So if you're familiar with this very attractive infographic called the Avoid, Shift, and Improve framework, it aims to reduce transport emissions. And the most current strategies focus on shifting to more sustainable modes of transport or to improving the existing modes. But shift and improve measures aren't going to get us to the emissions reductions that we need. We really need to focus on finding ways to avoid and reduce the need for travel. And working to reduce demands will require us to rethink both the design of cities and metropolitan areas, as well as the global supply chains. Some cities are beginning to curb unnecessary travel by redesigning, adapting their built environment so the residents are able to access most of their daily needs within a limited radius, where walking, biking, public transport are the most efficient modes in terms of time and cost. While this idea has been popularized in Europe through the 15-minute city concept, we're actually now seeing examples of cities such as Houston, Texas, Chengdu in China, taking on variation of this concept, tailoring it to their specific development needs and patterns. And this type of planning also requires coordination across different city agencies, like the transport agency, land use planning, housing, social services, economic development, etc. On the topic of supply chains, freight accounts for an estimated 40% of emissions from transport, and the projection shows global freight demand tripling by 2050. So with the technology solutions such as zero emission vehicles, aircraft, and long distance trucks are still far from maturity, it would be critical to find ways to rework global supply chains and reduce the unnecessary travel of goods. And that would mean moving forward with more local and circular production and consumption patterns to shorten the supply chains, promoting a less resource-intensive sharing economy, as well as focusing shipping and stock management strategies to ensure efficiency by aggregating deliveries, for example. So these changes could reduce unnecessary transport distances and also facilitate the use of shorter haul electric trucks or cargo bikes in cities. The second takeaway, and what we can see from both of these examples, is that a wide range of stakeholders actually do impact travel demand and behavior, far beyond the governments, the planners, the engineers who are traditionally seen as having the largest impact on our transport system. So for example, the decisions from employers, schools, retailers, medical facilities, among others, they all impact demand and are critical factors in this transformation. The policymakers and the leading transport decarbonization efforts need to find ways to engage this diverse set of stakeholders in their planning and decision-making process. And the third and the final takeaway is that financing needs to be redirected to support the transition to zero-emission transport. There are two major points here. The first being that the urgent need to end fossil fuel subsidies and to use that money to support public transport and other low-carbon transport modes. Since 2015, G20 member countries have already spent more than $3.3 trillion in fossil fuel subsidies. And there are obviously a lot of political and social challenges associated with this, but with the key being to be viable and affordable that we need viable and affordable transport alternatives in place before ending these subsidies. And the second point is that social and environmental costs of transport needs to be better reflected in the actual price of transport. So right now, taxpayers are subsidizing many of the negative impacts of transport, such as road crashes, air pollution, congestion, which cost society billions of dollars. And transport users currently only pay a fraction of the full societal cost. So more efforts needs to be made to fully align user fees and costs. And that can be done using measures such as road tolls, parking fees, congestion pricing, which we're now seeing in some cities. So in summary, we can't rely on carbon offsets or technology to reach zero emissions in transport by 2050. We need structural changes to reduce transport demand. We need to engage a much broader group of stakeholders in the transition, and we need to redirect financing that is currently being used to support fossil fuel powered transport. So this is a quick summary of the chapter. We invite everyone to take a look at the report that we have co-authored, and so happy to answer any questions in the chat box if possible, but I'll hand over the time to Jan. Thank you.
No, thanks a lot, Alice, and that was very, very clear, and thank you for the conclusion. Of course, I'm not precise, but that's a good point that you mentioned. If you have, any questions, please do not hesitate to ask them directly in the chat, and afterwards, Alice or I, or we can reply to it directly in the chat. So do not hesitate. Thanks, Alice. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
And Dipti, I pass you the floor now, so you can share your screen normally, and please, we are really happy to hear you and hear about your work and the insight on transport in India. We can see your screen, but you are still muted, apparently.
Okay, thank you, Jan. I'll just make it full screen. Yeah, is it visible now?
It's perfect.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I will be presenting my work on India's transport sector on the way to a zero emission future. And particularly, I'll be talking about the challenges and enabling conditions in the transport sector for India. I am briefly about myself and my institute before I begin. I'm Deepti Gupta, and I am currently working as a faculty in Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow, in the business sustainability area. And I've been researching researching on energy sector, and most of my work is on energy economy modeling, and wherein I have looked into the whole Indian economy. So this particular work is on transport sector. So yeah. So starting with the presentation, I'll first provide a brief context of the Indian transport sector greenhouse gas emissions. Achieving the net zero carbon requires transitions in the transport sector, as it is the second largest contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions after power sector, as was also mentioned by Alice in previous presentation. So among the four transport modes in India, we see that the road transport accounted for most of the sectoral emissions, that is 90.1% of the total emissions from the transport sector. Now, another challenge for India is that we are importing 83% of the total crude oil demand. That amounts to US $110 billion per year. So given that in India, 82.5% of the fuels are consumed by transport sector are the refined petroleum products. So in this context, transport sector transitions play a critical role in the country's energy security dynamics also. So India's transport sector is also expected to grow massively, as currently India has below 30 cars per 1,000 persons compared to USA's 750. So how the Indian transport sector has transitioned over the last 7 decades, we see that there has been a constant decline in the modal share of railways in both passenger and freight transportation. So this is the data starting from 1950 to the recent data that you see on the screen. Now, for our analysis, which also forms the basis of the report, which Jan was mentioning, we undertake 4 alternate pathways for our analysis, and that is based on the varying development and decarbonization conditions, and the corresponding demand side and supply side indicators for transport sector. The first scenario, business as usual scenario, is based on the current policies and programs. The second scenario, development first scenario. In this scenario, we give precedence to the development goals rather than the carbon mitigation targets. Now here we focus on the on development mode, and this is achieved through the expenditure covered by saving the oil imports. So even by 40% oil imports, we can contribute significantly for the development programs. And herein the main transitions in the transport sector that we focus on is the biofuels and electrification. The third scenario is the carbon neutrality scenario, which focuses more on achieving the zero national greenhouse gas emissions during 2050 to 2065. Now here we do take care that the carbon neutrality is not forced at a very high cost to the system and the people. And this is achieved by higher targets, by larger targets for the modal shift, more intensive electrification, using advanced technologies, and much improved vehicle efficiency, and the behavioral shift also. The last scenario, we try to synchronize the development and the decarbonization objectives rather than prioritizing one of them. So under these assumptions, under these set of assumptions and narratives on economic, technological, and socio-cultural transitions, we find that the overall transport sector carbon dioxide emissions reduced by 66.3% in the carbon neutrality scenario compared to BAU in 2030, and by 89.4% in 2050. So this emission reduction is facilitated by the supply side transitions, that is the adoption of hydrogen fuel, electrification, higher penetration of electric vehicles, gradual reduction in the carbon content of the national power grid, adoption of stringent vehicle efficiency norms, and behavioral changes. Also, the demand side transitions, that is increase in work from home and adoption of digital technology, facilitate these transitions. We also see in the figure on the slide here that the modal shares for both freight and passenger transport, they become balanced, especially for the freight transportation. We are able to reach 50% share for road and rail by 2030 in our carbon neutrality scenario. So moving to the main obstacles and barriers to climate policy, we find that the main barrier is the lack of last mile connectivity and interconnectivity between the modes. Currently, high cost of shifting from one mode to another is leading to a tilt towards road transport by the transporters and suppliers. Along with the investment in infrastructure, digitalization of rail transport is currently lacking with no real-time information on movement of freight, no price rationalization, and inadequate capacity. So these are the barriers that are inhibiting the modal shift towards rail. In the case of passenger transport, we find that the main barrier is the quality of public transport in terms of comfort and safety. Also, the transport facilities need to be aligned with the urban transit policy so that the demand for transport remains under control and congestion on the roads or platforms is also avoided. Lastly, the electrification of vehicles remains a huge challenge that includes huge battery cost, technology evolution that can increase the range, and adequate charging infrastructure. This challenge is particularly bigger for freight transport because the technology is still in the nascent stage here. Now, if we look at the short-term, medium-term, and long-term transformations required for achieving these the transitions, we find that in short term, digitalization and price rationalization in case of rail freight can be taken up for increasing the rail modal share of for freight. Subsidies and incentives should continue for electric vehicles, and policies like rapid rail transit and metro policy should be expanded to other rapidly urbanizing regions as well. So the key conclusion So our research is also published. The results are also published in the top-rated peer-reviewed journal, Transportation Research Part D, Transport and Environment. Our key conclusion is that the traffic pie would increase by 200% in freight and 20% in passenger from 2020 to 2030. So what we conclude is that all modes will gain, although the relative shares of the modes will change. So cumulative emission savings are also seen up to 10 to 12 billion tons of CO2 during 2013 to 2050 compared to BAU from the transport sector alone. So and along with this, the power sector has to decarbonize simultaneously because we are assuming that electrification of the passenger and freight transport will happen in a big way. So the power sector has to decarbonize simultaneously. So this was all from my side. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Deepti. Thanks a lot for this, for this short introduction and on the context and how you see the challenges in India. So now let's move to the panel conversation. I will try again to share my screen with some difficulties as just as before, but let me not share that, but here, yeah. So let's so I will ask actually Teng Fei, Yue Chuan, Marta Torres to unmute themselves and maybe to try to have a conversation. And because we are a small group today, and I think it's really interesting, we have the opportunity to have people from Vietnam, from India, from China around the table. I would be glad indeed to kickstart this conversation, and maybe the first question I would like to ask you in this order, please. I mean, you can take the floor then afterwards. But the first question I would like to ask you, guys, is actually regarding it's about your understanding of the climate ambition. So actually, the point I have here, so it's more general opening question, is what is actually your personal stock take of the climate ambition in transport? And please share also from your country specificities. And how do you see the key progress that have been made, or the remaining barriers that you still identify to decarbonize this subsector? Please, Keng-Fei, we offer you the opportunity to start and then continue with Raytran and Garima if you join, and Marta afterwards.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yan, for inviting me to give comments in this very interesting workshop. Regarding to the transportation in China, I think that firstly, as you may know, that in the last year, September, that President Xi announced the carbon neutrality target for China. China aimed to achieve the carbon neutrality before 2060. And we have done some scenario studies on this 2060 carbon neutrality scenarios, and the results shows that if China want to achieve the carbon neutrality before 2060, then the carbon dioxide emission in transportation sectors need to be reduced by more than 90% from the 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide emission level today to less than 10 million tons of carbon dioxide by 2060. So that means we need tremendous decarbonization in the transportation sectors. And I think that currently the China is still in the process to plan a roadmap towards that carbon neutrality target till 2060. And the recent progress is China is going to publish a set of documents and plans called 1+N, which also covers the transportation tax sectors. The near-term target, I think, is just to I think is aimed to promote the electric vehicles in transportation sectors and to replace the gasoline vehicles in short term. There is hotly debated on whether or not China should ban the sales of gasoline vehicles in a short time, but there is still no formal decision on this. But the recent progress on the promotion of the electric vehicles is China has become the top sale market together with European Union. You know, last year, annually, that I think that the global, for the world, it will the sale of the electric vehicles is generally, I think, is 3 million or 4 million electric vehicles every year, and the China and the sale of electricity vehicles in China is about 1.5 million in last year. And for this year, according to the most recent numbers, the annual sale of electric vehicles could achieve about 2 million per year. So it seems that there is a booming of the electric vehicles in Chinese market, but that is still not enough because of if we want to achieve this carbon neutrality, we need to increase the share of the electric vehicles to more than 50% or 60% in 2030, and then almost 80 to 90% in 2060. So that requires the electric vehicles can compete with the gasoline vehicles in the passenger transportation sector. And the second one is, I think that one progress in China is promotion of the high-speed railway. This technology can replace the short-run aviation. In China, the experience is for those cities, they have connection with the high-speed railway. The transportation demand for aviation will be reduced substantially. Because of the emission intensity of high-speed railway is much lower than aviation, so that also deliver a lot of mitigation benefit. I think that could be an experience can be shared with others if their geological situation is suitable for this high-speed railway, and that will be very important technology to replace the emission from the aviation sector, because of normally those sectors are hard to abate. But still, I think there is also the common challenge in Chinese transport sectors, especially for the long run freight transportation, which is most difficult part to be decarbonized, and also the aviation and shipping sector, which requires more technology based on hydrogen. And that technology and low carbon fuel production is still not in good progress at this moment. So we need more technology development and also policy development in those areas to target on those hard abated sectors in transport sector to achieve this decarbonization in those sectors in the long run. So I will stop here, turn over to you. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Teng Fei, for providing this in-depth picture on the progresses and challenges in remaining in China. So very, very interesting. And maybe I pass you directly the floor. I mean, Richan from the Ministry of Vietnam, maybe you can also share with us a bit your assessment or your perspective about this or your stock take here about the situation.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your invitation. And as your question, I should go directly for the first question. That's how, and I think about the 2050s for climate ambition. I think after some presentations, I think it's quite ambitious for in general. And also is for the transportation sectors. And for me, is the for the 2050 climate ambition is the represents the commitment to further reduce the emission of cost towards the carbon neutral basics by 2050. And I think it's the right. There is a significant challenge involved in the process that we towards for the carbon neutral. And of course, however, we cannot succeed alone. So we need to work collaboratively with the varieties of stakeholders in a sustainable future, and including the transport sector for Vietnam. I think it's I just for the news that's Vietnam does approve the Vietnam the national strategy for green growth just on October, the first day of October. That's issue the new strategy. That's the update many new target. Green growth for the VGGS for in short, that is contributes to promotes economic restructuring associated with the growth model innovation to achieve the economic properties, environmental sustainability, and social justice. That is the general target. And also for the VGGS also moving towards a green carbon neutral economy, and contributing to the goal of limiting the global temperature rise. So for the targets, for the very important target of the VGGS, that's we focus on the reduce the intensities of greenhouse gas emission per unit of GDP. Particularly target to the 2030. We focus on the reduce the intensities of greenhouse gas emission per unit of GDP by at least 15% compared to the 2014. And to 2050, we reduce and the intensities of greenhouse gas emission per unit of GDP by at least 30% compared to the 2014. So for the target towards 20, that we focus many things, many sectors, but for the transportation, the key targets we focus is the towards 2050, 2030 is the rate of public transport in spatial urban area, and grade 1 cities will reach at least 20% and 5% respectively. The rate of buses using clean energy will reach at least 15% compared to the total number of the existing buses, and we will reach 10% of number of the new buses in grade 1 cities, and at least 10 urban areas will approve and implement the master plan on green growth urban development in the direction of the sustainable smart cities. And to the 2050, the rate of public transport at the same targets, but to 20 respectively is 40%, 50%, and for the rest of buses using clean energy in space and urban areas and grade 1 city is 100%. Is fully, and at least 40% of number of the new buses, at least 45 urban area will approve and implement the master plan on green growth urban development in the direction of sustainable smart cities. So as you may know, that in Vietnam, Vietnam will submit the NDC to the UNFCCC on July 2020. So that includes many goals and clear targets. For example, like for the transport sector, we focus on main 4 mitigation measures, including the strict energy use, E5, gasoline, CNG, and special electric vehicle. The second one is the passenger model, shift from the private to public transport sector. And the third one is the freight model shift from road to other mode. For example, like the waterway or railway. And the last one is the vehicle energy efficiencies in transport sector, like fuel economic standard. So after we are reviewing the national budgets used for the certain times, the transport sector is considered is one of the key role players in the energy demand and main emitters. Therefore, we, MPI, would promote more active solution in the transport sector, as well as enhance the finance mobilizing source for implemented in the future. It's a very near future, and develop and improve the institution and policy is very important to develop the green transport infrastructure, develop the public transport system also, and improve the freight transport productivity in transport subsectors. And of course, we formulate and organize the implementation of solutions to encourage the vehicle using clean, economical, efficient energy and environmentally friendly technologies, promote the restructurings of the transport market shares in the directions of the converting the freight transport to road, to inland waterways, sea ways, and railways. And the next solution is the prioritize resources for investment, completion, and exploitations of the green transport infrastructure to ensure the economic efficiencies and environmental protection, contribute to reduce greenhouse gas emission, and enhance resilience to climate change and sea level rise. Implement research programs and apply the science technology to ensure that the efficiencies use of energy in implementing investment project to complete the public transport infrastructure, and develops the mass public transport infrastructure, non-motorized transport infrastructure, and infrastructure to ensure the connection of the modes of transport. And the next one is the reviews, the recommend adjustment to develop project in transport sector to ensure the restructuring transport markets toward the green and sustainable growth. And again, we do research and apply the digital technology is very important. That it could help Vietnam to optimize the management and operation of traffic infrastructure and transport activities, and also for safe and smooth traffic, reduce energy consumption. And in terms of Vietnam government, and particularly here the MPI, would like to orient to promote the environmentally friendly vehicle. For example, like the electric vehicle and digitalization application in optimize the transport management and operating traffic infrastructure. That's of course, for example, like the for the as I mentioned,
I will ask you, Wei-Chuan, I will ask you if you can conclude just in a 1 minute, because we have other question and we would be glad to.
Okay. Yeah,
thank you.
That's yeah, it's the few seconds that as in terms of MPI, and I just mentioned that is in the core scenario, when we develop the BGGS, MPI considered to mobilize the financial resources from the private sector is very important, and we also mobilize the international fund to fund more to increase market sale of the e-mobility. That is very important. E-mobility is one of the priorities of Vietnam, and we do hope that is the solution and also priorities in the transport sectors can help the Vietnam to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and also is for more ambition targets than the NDC of the VGG so far. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Wei-Chuan, for this presentation of what the MPI in Vietnam is doing. I have some echo. If you could just unmute yourself. Thank you. Yeah, and so thank you for this. I don't know, Wei-Chuan, I can still hear me. I don't know if you can just reduce your sound.
Introduce myself.
No. I have some I have some echo. Could you cut your microphone, please?
I have the best signals of your voice, so please repeat again.
Sorry, no, I have muted you just because I had some echo, and so I muted you, Wei-Chuan. So the second question I would like to ask, and Marta, if you don't mind, I will actually start directly with the second question to try to have a more broader conversation. I think now what is important after at the end of this event is that actually we are we have presented you a bit the overall approach and objective of the report at this event, which is actually to try to look in depth into what are the obstacles, what are the last remaining barriers, or what are the let's say the potential progresses that we have seen in different in different countries or in the subsector of the transport. The point is, and we mentioned that for us, being able to look at this type of information, it was needed actually to enable to have a concrete conversation that in the end could reach the point to increase the NDCs and to increase, let's say, the ambition of the different countries. What do you think? So my question is, how do you think that this approach could be useful, say, for your work first, or for the climate negotiations, and let's say in general for the preparation of the global stocktake that will start next year? And please, can you share your views again in the same a bit in the same order, or maybe I will know, pass the floor just quickly to Marta first on this point, and just on this last question, and then we will conclude in the next 10 minutes maximum about this second question. Thank you. So Marta, maybe I will pass you the floor just to open this second round of question, and after Teng Fei and Rui-Tran, please.
Thank you, Jan. I think just very important reminding a bit the words that you were saying, Jan, at the beginning. No, we need two things: we need ambition and we need implementation. And at least when we think about the global stocktake, I think it is important that that there is an assessment, that there are some discussions, that there is the space for discussing between actors on these transformations that need to be happen, so that we can learn something new. And what is this new thing that we can learn? I think two things. One, either best practices that are happening elsewhere, experiences like the ones that you've been experiencing, what were the challenges and how implementation is starting, etc. But another thing, how we can cooperate in a way to make sure that those transformations can take place. Particularly, I think in the transport sector, and as Alice was saying at the beginning, for all those things that we need to do to shift also the demand side on the mobility and in relation to passenger, but notably also freight. So and for these cooperative approaches, I think what we've met is that what we've found out doing this ambition report, this exercise, is that it is very important to go to this granular level to understand exactly the circumstances, all these challenges, country by country, and somehow this information needs to be at the core of the conversations. And only when we see, okay, when we understand better what is the position of each of these countries in this journey to net zero, that we will be able to identify those cooperative approaches that, okay, if I know that the international community, if I know that other countries, if I know that there will be some cooperation in certain technologies or in certain efforts, for example, in terms of changing shift demand, then me as a country, I can go back to my domestic constituencies, to my domestic stakeholders, and tell them a story of how the boundary conditions will change, how the world is going to be moving, what efforts are going to take place globally. And then we can discuss internally, within my country, okay, so how does this affect us? How can we join this movement, this initiative? How can we benefit from these developments, and see how this could then translate in my own national ambition and national implementation plans, and ultimately be reflected to the new NDC if we think about the Paris Agreement, the Paris Agreement terms. So yeah, for me, just reiterating, that's how I would see that these type of conversations and analysis and information that you are sharing should be on the spotlight of the global stocktake as a moment of learning and cooperation, so that countries and parties and negotiators, policymakers can benefit, then can bring some fruits to their domestic discussions again, and to understand how to move further in terms of both ambition and implementation. Thanks so much, Jan.
No, thanks, Martha. Very, very helpful, and also a good point. And to mention, I don't know, Teng Fei, if you also wants to react and maybe and share your views about, let's say, this type of analysis and its role, let's say, in the given period for also your own work and the own research that you will produce, but also the climate negotiation, the global stocktake. So please let us know what you think about this.
Yeah, I think that as our experience in the previous work on the DDPP, those benchmarking across different countries could help countries to better understand their future potential for mitigation, and could form a concrete basis for country to increase their ambitions. For example, that in terms of the heavy truck sectors, which for most of the countries, which is a hard debated sector, if the international analysis can indicate the global efforts can accelerate the technology research and deployment in that sector, that will greatly increase the domestic confidence to accelerate the efforts in those areas. So I really think that those international comparison analysis and also the international technology cooperation focus on those key sectors will help the world to increase their ambitions. But I also need to see that the analysis is only the first step. We need concrete action to cooperate together in terms of research, in terms of technology development, aim to reduce the cost of those key technologies to leverage the global ambitions. So the analysis is only the first step, but we also need to follow those first steps with concrete cooperation on technology to move forwards. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe just a follow-up question that we are clearly mentioning kind of pilot project that helps indeed, let's say, develop, test the technology and provide some good example. Maybe, I don't know if you had, because I know that China is also providing a lot of large pilot projects. So I don't know if you would share maybe one idea or concrete maybe an example that you have in mind of this type of large pilot project that helps a bit, let's say, going at scale or yeah, testing the technology. Would you like to share something with us about this? Would be interesting, I feel.
Yeah, and I think that will go beyond the transportation sectors. I think that the next step we need to move is a more systematic approach focus on the energy consumption and carbon emission at a city level scale. We need to integrate the technology from transportation sector, the building sector, and other sectors to form an integrated solution at a city level to promote a zero emission cities. I think that China is moved towards that direction, that to launch the low carbon city palace, and also some cities has announced their plans to build zero emission cities. I think that kind of mode could be considered and could be replicated or shared in other countries, and also all countries in fact need to come together to integrate their technology solution into a package which the world level cities can use that to build and to establish a zero carbon city if they want.
and that's really unfortunate that Garima is not there, because it's really I mean, probably one of the main example that she would have used, also because she's working at the integrated urban transport program at WRI India, and I think that this is clearly clearly one of the key area where we could share among countries, and maybe with different and really interesting at the city level, because of the specificities also of the organization of cities, and sharing maybe what could be replicable or not, and how to adapt it to our own context between India, China, Indonesia, or Europe. We know that the cities are quite different, and I think it's really it would be the kind of really important international conversation to be organized indeed. Thank you, Teng Fei, and please, Raytran, I will ask you also the same question. I don't know if all this conversation about let's say the type of analysis that are required, going in depth into these specificities of the implementation, and indeed how to raise the ambition finally. How do you see this conversation useful for your work at the ministry, or for the preparation of the global stocktake and the next revision of NDCs, for example? Oh, I don't know if you can hear us correctly. I know that the connection was quite bad on your side. So maybe, yeah, maybe you cannot hear us now. But maybe just, and I will not make it too long, we have the opportunity to have, I mean, we have also Alice from Slokat and Deepti. If you are there, I would like also maybe just to give you the opportunity to say 2 words also on these topics, if you are interested. And before to, of course, close the meeting, because we are already a bit late regarding the original schedule. So I don't know if Deepti or Alice, you would like to add a word about this last question on how this conversation could help, I mean, further analysis and climate negotiations and UNFCCC global stocktake process.
Thank you, Jan, for giving a little opportunity for us. I would just quickly say that I know that there are a lot of knowledge and exchange opportunities already available for the stakeholders to actually participate and lessons learned. And you know, for the purpose of this session is really to let others know that these knowledge and these lessons learned can enable actions. And I think it's very important to seek for these, to seek further learning about these, and understand what the challenges and the conditions that we're facing right now, and also understand that different sectors are facing different conditions. So it's also not, it's also would be ideal to actually reach beyond our own community and seek more lessons learned from the other sectors as well, like energy, housing, land use, etc. Thank you.
No, thank you, and I think this is a good conclusion point. So thank you, Alice, for this last word, and I'm sure that also Slokat will be really helpful in this, being also focal point, I mean, for the transport stakeholders and within, let's say, the MPGCA community. So I really appreciate this last word on let's say reaching out also the other sector, because we have just now discussed example from the transport sector, but the approach is more general and broader than that. So thanks a lot to you all for your contribution and participation. So we will conclude now and finish now. So sorry we are a bit late regarding the schedule. I hope that you that you all enjoy the conversation, and and hopefully meet you maybe physically next time, I don't know, at COP or another UN event. And since then, take care, and I wish you a good day or good evening, depending on where you are. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jan.
Goodbye. Thanks, Jan.
You're welcome. Goodbye. Bye-bye.